Nomad Capitalist and yours truly got savaged by another YouTuber saying, don't move for lower taxes, and today I'm going to respond. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. This is Nomad Capitalist, where we've helped everyone from billionaires to celebrities to everyday 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors like yourself to go where you are treated best. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. And I got called out. Someone shared with me a YouTube video from a gentleman named Alex Hormozi who talked about why you shouldn't move overseas, you shouldn't move to Puerto Rico, you shouldn't go anywhere to reduce your taxes, that it's all just a waste of time. Now, I have to admit, I like this guy's content. I've been watching some of his stuff. He's a real entrepreneur and I enjoy the stuff that he puts out, but I happen to have some serious disagreements with him. And I think it all starts with the fact that people often think that because Nomad Capitalist is on YouTube, because we have a blog, because we are a virtual company, because we operate in up-and-coming countries for lower taxes, for lower costs, for more freedom, that somehow we are a less than business than companies that are in London or that are in Los Angeles. And I would push back on that. I will compare our revenue, our profitability, any metric of financials that you want against really any of the companies in the citizenship business, against a lot of other companies of people who do talk on YouTube. This idea in 2022 that because you are doing new media, because you're working virtually, that you're not as big, I push back on that. I think that probably influences some of this conversation where it's like, okay, real entrepreneurs stay in the United States and they just suck it up and they pay the high taxes, and the guys who really don't make that much, they go offshore. So I push back on that. Listen, I like this guy's content. Let me go through the arguments one by one, because what somebody said was, finally a real competitor for Nomad Capitalist. Andrew Henderson, move to a different country and save half your taxes. Alex Hormozi, live wherever you want and focus on doubling your business. Let me be clear. Those things are not mutually exclusive. Number one, you can instantly nearly double your business by keeping more of the money that you've been paying to your government that they are now using to take away your freedoms. They're not using it wisely. I don't care whether you're a libertarian or not. The governments of the Western world are not using your money wisely. Listen, if you live in Montenegro and your tax rate's 9% and you want to stay there, by all means you do it. Listen, stay wherever you want, but you can instantly nearly double your business just by reducing the tax burden. That's money you can put back into your business, hiring more people, doing more advertising, doing whatever more of what works. And then on top of that, what I've seen since I expatriated from the United States, not even just since I moved out of the United States, but since I severed all my ties with the US, my business has grown 23-fold. And so for me, as someone who had a disconnect in the US, that severing of ties seriously helped me grow the business in a very big way. And so the idea of moving to a different country to save on taxes as a scarcity play, to me, is not correct. To me, it's an abundance play. It allows you to be more abundant and allows you to feel a lot better about your business. It allows you to do a lot more things. Double your business by saving the 50% tax bill, and then double it again because you're just more of the mode where you're not wasting money. You're not doing so many of the inorganic things where you try and pile up a bunch of deductions on December 30th to save money. And I think that those two can live hand in hand. So he says, don't worry about tips and tricks. He said 75 or 95% rather of the solutions are swampland and 5% is legit. I am the goody two-shoes of the offshore industry, as people have accused me of being. And so, yeah, there has been a lot of tactics in the offshore industry that when I started this, I said, you're going to see my face, you're going to see my real name. I'm not using stock photos and made up names. I'm not operating as some, I'm not, granddad or whatever you are, where, you send money to my P.O. box and I'll pick it up under a rock and I'll consult you in a car. We drive by the gas station. None of that. I'm Andrew Henderson. You can see me. Hundreds of people every year see me all around the world. They come up to me. I'm a real person. And so I've done that for the very reason that I believe real life entrepreneurs like Alex Hormozi, like myself, like you watching, deserve the opportunity to go where you're treated best. This should not be the territory of shady people. I want you to follow all the rules. I want you to go with the legit strategies, and they're here. All you have to do is go to nomadcapitalist.com and we'll help you put that together, Alex. He says tax shelters cost more than they save. Now, no one's really calling them tax shelters. That's something that usually the media or bitter ex-employees use to kind of attack people and play on emotions, even though 62% of Americans don't pay any federal income tax anymore. So whose tax shelter is it really? But does it cost more than it saves? No, because one of the criteria that we use when we onboard people here is, can we get this person a successful ROI? I saw a message, I just went to do some spot checks the other day, saw a message that someone from our team sent to a guy on social media, and he was laying out his numbers, and they said, like, listen, we can get you an ROI within 1 to 2 weeks of what you're paying. If you apply our principles and you're willing to live within some rather wide guidelines, we can get you an ROI in 1 to 2 weeks. Now, if you figure, hey, I'm going to spend $100,000 on putting together an airtight tax strategy that covers all the bases in every jurisdiction where I operate, from where I live, from where my citizenship is, where my residence is, where my employees are, everything across the board, how am I going to put that together for $100,000? If I'm making $10 million a year and I'm paying $4 million in taxes, yeah, $100,000 is nothing. How exactly does that cost more than it saves? I mean, let's say that I'm making $1 million a year and paying $400,000 in taxes, and I go for a watered down version and I'm going to pay $75,000. I've got an ROI in a couple of months and I can stay overseas and run my business and grow it a lot faster. I'm going to get my money back in 2 or 3 months. Some people get it back in weeks. And then for the next 10 years, potentially, I'm going to save that tax money as my business grows. I don't recommend people who think their businesses are about to fail go offshore. If your business is growing, you can go overseas and it's going to cost you a lot more than it saves. Listen, maybe Alex Hormozi is following these guys that charge $500,000 for tax structuring. I have friends who have done that approach. We have never done a single case that costs $500,000 for tax savings alone, let alone everything all together, which to me, proof is perhaps that I'm not charging enough. As much as these YouTube viewers think I'm charging too much, maybe I'm not charging enough, because there are people out there charging a heck of a lot more. But if you do it properly, you can go overseas and you can get an ROI very quickly. He says it takes a lot of time to vet things, create new entities, transfer stuff, reincorporate. Listen, sure. I mean, the more complicated your business is, yeah, you might have IP. You might have to get valuations of your business. You might have to move it. You might have to relocate employees or set up, ring fence employees. I mean, there's so many things you could do, which is why I've always said, and I have no interest in saying it, because if you're starting up a business, you're probably not going to be our client, right? I mean, we take people who have a certain level of income, a certain net worth. So unless it's like your next business after you just sold one, you're probably not going to be our client. But I've said, nevertheless, in the interest of creating successful people, go overseas when your business is just starting. That's the best time to do it. And so if you're watching this when you already have a successful business, yeah, listen, I'm glad that I started Nomad Capitalist overseas, because moving it now, moving it in 2021 when my door was being beaten down by everybody and business more than tripled overnight, yeah, it would have been pretty hard to do that. But listen, you can hire people to help you, drop contribution agreements, you can transfer stuff, you can value things, you can do IP. Listen, I mean, it may take a matter of months, and depending on how complex your business is, it may take a little bit of back-end work. It might take a heck of a lot of work. But you can outsource all that, and you're going to want to outsource it because no one wants your valuation of the business. They want a formal valuation. So, I mean, the best advice to it takes time is do it as early as possible so you have the most simple business to move overseas. But you know what? If you are a guy who says, hey, my companies have $85 million in revenue, listen, I mean, even if you're only making 10% on that, $8.5 million, taxes are going to be $3 million, right? I mean, you can pay people a heck of a lot less than $3 million at a very high level to do that. Listen, I like what this guy puts out, but I think that there's a couple things to push back on. The next argument is there's lots of travel. And so he gave the example of a friend who travels back and forth from Puerto Rico. And listen, my approach is if you choose a lifestyle that you like, okay, the point that's correct is you're not really going to live in the United States and execute an offshore strategy. For asset protection, possibly. For tax reduction, not really. And so what a lot of Americans do is they feel like it's like a baby step to go to Puerto Rico. And I'm all for that, especially Americans who have a lot of capital gains, a lot of passive income. That's going to be oftentimes their best option. Not tax advice, just what I've seen in my past experiences. But if you're an entrepreneur who's generating active income, you can also move to anywhere else in the world. You can do as I've done historically, and you can be totally nomadic. You can do as I do now and spread your time between different countries. You can live in one tax-friendly country all year round. You don't have to be going back and forth. And so my suggestion when I say go where you're treated best is, it's not go where you can avoid taxes by living in a place that you hate. It's figuring out where it is that you like living. And so many Americans don't understand you can still substantially reduce your tax bill by moving offshore. I don't care how big your business is. There are ways to do it. potentially for some people all the way to zero, for others to relatively low rates, far less than you'd pay in the United States. But Americans think I have to go to Puerto Rico, that's the only option. That is an option, it's not the only option. And why don't you just choose a place that you want to live? I think that some of these guys think that people like me are like leaving because we have no choice. And when the reality is, back in 2008, 2009, I was thinking about, I want to live in other countries. And like many people in their early 20s, mid 20s, it was, you know, the girls in Europe seem to like me more and I get along with them a lot better. Let me go live somewhere else where I feel like my entrepreneurship is valued, people understand me more. And so then it started to cause the questions of, well, wait a second, I am paying a lot of taxes here. What can I do if I'm living overseas to reduce those taxes? And I kind of figured it out. But the goal wasn't to move for the tax savings. The tax savings came afterwards, right? Now, there's not a lot of business in telling people how to move to Europe to meet nicer girls. That's why that's not my business. But, you know, it's not all of us are like, I got to go somewhere else. Some of us are, I don't care if I can spend 30 days in the US and still not pay. I don't want to go to the US. You're welcome to believe differently. And by the way, we serve people who would love to live in the US, but they would also like to save money on taxes, and they do grin and bear it for 5 years to save away some money. But the point is, you don't have to be always traveling back and forth. Find a place that you like to live, stay there, commit to it for 6 months or 9 months or 11 months or whatever the numbers are for your particular situation. And so, you know, for all these people out there who are like, you got to be tough, you got to be manly. Listen, I'm not saying this is for everybody. You know what's manly? What's manly is walking into a U.S. embassy and putting your passport on the table and saying, I don't want this anymore. Here's $2,350. I'm going to go through my life as an adventurer with citizenship of other countries, living all over the world and adapting and learning those hard lessons. And so for everyone out there who thinks that, like, you know, the strong approach is just to stay in Los Angeles, you know what? If you want to develop yourself personally, I have developed so much as a person by living in other countries and brushing up against those cultures. It's improved me as an entrepreneur. It's improved me as a person. It's improved me as a friend and a relationship partner. And so his argument is there's a lot of you know, people talking about they miss stuff. Like, you know, you're going to miss out on someone's birthday party or a wedding. You can set up a tax strategy as an American or anybody else, and you can go back for weddings. You can go back for the birth of your sister's child. You can go back for whatever else. Now, I've advised people, and by the way, after all my years of doing this, I have convinced some of my family and friends to move, at least part-time, outside of their country, and they love it. They saw me doing it. They wouldn't have done it before, but now they saw me successfully doing it, so now they do it. And so it's like, I have people whose parents are like, oh, okay, I'm going to come and live with you in Portugal. I'm going to come and live with you in Mexico. Why don't you bring your family with you? Why don't you bring your business partner with you? Why don't you all go where you get treated best? But for the people that you need to go back and visit, then you can still do that. I mean, there's not really any kind of tax plan where you can like really never go back. Obviously, expatriating from the United States is the closest that you'll get to that. And there still may be ways you can go back to the US, or there's ways you can bring people to you. On the other hand, go where you're treated best extends beyond the United States in all ways. My wife is not from the United States, and so I'm not like missing out on my wife's family. Many of my friends I've met all around the world are in Colombia, or in Norway, or in Portugal, or in Malaysia, or in Serbia, or in Montenegro, or in all over the world. And so I'm not really missing out because I've been developing this life over the years to where I still have friends, and I know who my real friends are because I have friends who get on 15-hour flights and come from the US to, several years ago, Hong Kong to celebrate my birthday. I have friends who come and visit me. And you know what? Sometimes we meet somewhere in the middle and I visit them. I don't really think that you're missing anything. There's plenty of ways to work around that. Another thing he says was, most of the big tips and tricks get unwound in years because the IRS is 3 to 5 years behind. I do agree with that. The IRS is often 3 to 5 years behind, but here's what you don't do. You don't do weird stuff. You don't set up these weird structures. This is not my advice, but I did have one of our tax guys said, yeah, Malta pension plan that's so in vogue. Yeah, I don't really like it. Not tax advice, just saying that someone told me anecdotally. Don't do weird stuff. But you know what's pretty plain vanilla? Is changing your tax home if you're not an American, or using some of the tax exclusions and exemptions as an American to go overseas. The stuff we do here is pretty vanilla, quite frankly. I'm a pretty risk-averse person. I'm a pretty conservative guy. Now, you might not think I'm an entrepreneur my entire life. You know, I mean, for me, that's low risk. This stuff that we talk about can be low risk. I tend to be very conservative in my approach. Sometimes we'll have a tax guy in our network who will give someone a little bit more aggressive advice. I tend to be pretty conservative, and so I'm not doing aggressive stuff. It's pretty vanilla to say, go live in another country, pay taxes there, and if you're an American, deal with your taxes in the US through proper structuring that reduces your rate. He also says tax shelters decrease your net worth. I don't entirely understand that argument, but for me, again, the argument is I'm more motivated being able to keep more of my own money. By the way, I mean, look at what's happening in the world right now. A lot of people are suffering. I'm able to give more. This is something that people push back on. Some of the people in our audience push back on me for doing this and for even talking about it. I've always been, since I was 8 years old, inspired by charitable giving. I've got a lot more money and I'm in a much better mood to give that money away because I'm paying so much less in tax. And I view that as, rather than giving 43% to the US government, I can give some lesser percentage away to things that are important, to charities that actually do good work and that are efficient with that money to take care of things that are happening, to help people out, whether they're, someone that I know who their sister has a problem and she needs a $10,000 operation and I handle that, whether it's I have homes around the world and I've got a friend who's hurting, or I have friends from Ukraine who need a place to go, stay there, whether it's giving money to people I've never met to solve problems. I mean, for me, you're going to have more money, you're going to do more stuff, you're going to be more motivated, and you're going to get a lot more done, quite frankly, by keeping more of your own money. The other thing he mentions is thinking in increments rather than orders of magnitude. Again, our business is up substantially since I cut my ties with the US, and it's not a financial conversation. That is a conversation of oneness that I feel now more aligned in my own life. I feel more aligned with my identity. Now again, if you love being American, this may not be for you, but to say that people who want to go overseas and save money on tax and to be able to give more, do more, grow more, are not thinking in orders of magnitude. I've seen orders of magnitude, and I see it every day with people that we help who've grown substantially because they can reinvest more money into their business. Business is a competition. I know a lot of the entrepreneurs on Instagram don't want you to know that, but you're competing with people who are already doing business in Malta, who are already doing business in Dubai, who are already doing business all around the world, and they're paying 0 and 5%. You've got to compete with them, and that's hard. And so if you want orders of magnitude, you've got to be competitive. The world does not begin and end at the United States. Saving tax money will hurt other aspects of life. Because of tax savings, you can't live with people that you want, okay? Again, a lot of my friends in the U.S. Did not live where I lived in the U.S. I lived in Arizona when I was an adult. Grew up in Ohio, then I moved to Arizona. So everyone I knew in Ohio, I didn't live with them anymore. Now I'm in Arizona, and I had some friends, but I also had friends in Chicago, I had friends in New York, I had friends in Los Angeles, I had friends in Seattle, and I had to go and see them from time to time. And I think a lot of people, especially in the Western world, people move around. I mean, are you always, we had so many friends over the course of my 10 or 11 years living in Arizona. They moved to Orlando, they moved to, wherever, they moved to Vegas. And I don't know that necessarily works. I mean, bring your friends and family, bring your business partners with you. Do this together, right? And by the way, I've also seen people who are Americans who their girlfriend's Mexican, their girlfriend's Filipino, their girlfriend is whatever, their boyfriend's whatever, and they can't come to the US. And so what do they do then? The richest people, he says, live in the US. Billionaires are rising fastest in Asia. So the idea that the richest people live in the US, sure. And I believe certainly that anyone can become successful. I don't buy into this narrative in the media that like, oh, don't fight for the billionaires because you'll never be one. I think you could become a billionaire, and I've learned that lesson on the way up by realizing that the most successful people, guys I've known and worked with who've had hundreds of millions of dollars, are just like you. They're just more motivated, they execute better. That's what they do. So I'm not here to say you can't become a billionaire, but maybe you don't have the desire to be a billionaire. And so, what does that really matter to you? Whether you do or whether you don't, why don't you go what works for you? By the way, Eduardo Saverin from Facebook, he gave up US citizenship and moved to Singapore. I don't think he's suffering, okay? So this US-focused view to me is kind of silly. Also mentioned, a lot of issues here. Reputational risk. Listen, I have had people who've come to me who are well-known and said, hey, I don't really want this to get out because if people in my clientele knew that I was running my business through somewhere else, hey, can we put together a multi-part structure to where, I have some part of my business in the US and the taxes are still low. Okay. Obviously, I'm the extreme example. I mean, one time someone complained that they had to send money to a Hong Kong bank account to pay me. That was their issue. I said, wouldn't you complain if I didn't ask you to send money to a honk? Like, this is the business that I'm in, right? If you see my name in the Pandora Papers, you won't be surprised. But I think that the narrative is changing. And by the way, there are plenty of very tax-friendly places where you can live that are in Europe, for example. We're not talking about going to Vanuatu, and I would really never encourage. I had a guy message me. I had a gentleman we worked with a couple years ago who came back and said, hey, I'm ready for round 2. Can you help me go to one of these places? I said, no, I won't help you go to those places because those places are dodgy as hell. No, I don't recommend that. So you don't want to be dodgy. You don't want to go to places that have a bad reputation. But there are so many competitive places now where you can go and pay 0 or 1 or 3%. You want to be dealing with places that have a good reputation, but there is enough competition where you can go both where you're incorporated and where you're living, and you can eliminate the places that sound shady. He also talks about the 85-year-old self-test and talks about what will you think when you're 85 years old? And you know what I'll think when I'm 85 years old? I will think that I lived a full life of traveling and living and dating people from all around the world, and I'll look back and say, I gave not only my family, my children, and myself a great opportunity. I was able to grow a business faster, employ more people, create more opportunities because I lived that adventurous life that also happened to financially incentivize me. I gave as much as I could. I just very simply lived that full life. And so, you know, there's so many arguments here to speak to. When you give up your ownership control, I own 100% of my companies. You know, he's talking about don't talk about stuff that you don't know. Well, I mean, when you're talking about tax shelters and you're using that as that's your argument, you don't know what we're doing here at Nomad Capitalist. I don't want to double my income just so I can double my expenses. There has to be some point where they start to detach and where you get to keep more of what you're earning, because quite frankly, the idea that you make $10 million, you pay $4 million, the average person in your country pays $0 in tax, and you're the one who's the problem. I don't buy into that. So if you love living in Los Angeles, listen, you don't need to defend that as, I don't know where Alex Hormozi lives, but if you love living in Los Angeles, you're living in Miami, listen, I'm going to tell you, hey, you can find a lot of the attributes of Miami somewhere else. You can find that somewhere else, whether you want lower cost of living, whether you want better culture, whether you want better dating life, whether you want lower taxes. You can get a lot of that all wrapped up into one bow. You may not believe it. You know, I was in Dubai over the summer. There's some pretty wild stuff going on there, akin to what you might find in a place like Miami. And you can go there and you can legally reduce your taxes to as low as 0. So if you want to stay behind in those places after hearing all the arguments, hey, I'm with you. You get to do what you want and I get to do what I want. But let's not make it an issue of how I'm somehow running from something or that I'm small-minded. I made a choice of where I wanted to live. I decided that I could save a lot of money. I've shown how I've grown my business dramatically, and I think a lot of other people can do that too. The idea of that to me is a scarcity-minded idea is saying, I've got to stay within my own country because everything else is bad. Bad reputation, I'll regret it when I'm 85 years old. By the way, if you leave your country and you save some money, you can come back in 5 years. What's stopping you? Unless you give up your citizenship, which most people aren't going to do, you can come back in 5 years. Make it a 5-year adventure. Are you going to regret when you're 85 years old that from 37 to 42, you went and traveled the world and met interesting people and did interesting stuff? That you exposed your kids to different stuff around the world? I highly doubt it, right? If you don't want to do that, that's fine. But I see the power in this to dramatically improve your lives, the lives of people around you, to grow your company, to create generational wealth. When I'm 85 years old, that's what I want to say that I did. Don't stop now. We've got well over 1,000 more videos here on YouTube for you to watch and learn how to go where you're treated best. And if you want to work with Nomad Capitalist personally, go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, learn about our unique, tried and true process, garnered over years of experience, and learn how you can become our client.